What is up, Impact Heroes? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rick Ornelas. Thank you for spending some time with us today because we know time's a valuable resource and we're going to make it worth your while. I appreciate each and every one of you, not just for listening, but for who you are. I know you're sparking change to make the world a better place every day, and I am humbled and grateful for your efforts. It takes all of us doing our part to spread positive change, and that's what this show is all about. Motivating you with stories of struggle, courage, and hope to empower you to make a difference in your life and the lives of others. Hey, hero community. We are looking to feature more amazing social impact heroes on our show, and I'll bet all you listeners out there know a few that deserve to be recognized. If you or anyone you know should be on our radar, then you absolutely have to nominate them to be an iSpark Change social impact hero. Just click the link in the show notes below to help us find out about more people that are doing great things. Welcome back, Impact Heroes. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to our latest iSpark Change social impact hero, human behavior and performance coach, speaker, and heart surgeon without a blade, Brian Bogert. Brian, welcome to the iSpark Change podcast.
By the way, I love that you just did that as like bullet points. You might be the first person that's ever thrown in heart surgeon without a blade as a part of my titles and things that I do.
Woo-hoo.
And Rick, I love it, brother. I love it. I'm so excited to be here with you, man.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to have you on and dive into, you being a social impact hero, and the fact that I'm the first one that ever said that. But that stood out. That stood out on your bio that you're, heart surgeon without a blade, because that resonated with me and I loved it. So of course I was going to share that with others. So
yeah, no, I like I said, typically when people say that, it's like now mixed into whatever the language and the copy is that's supporting that sentence that you extracted it from. And it's one of my good friends kind of gave me that analogy to use, and that's how he viewed me. And so yes, it sticks out. But like I said, I probably need to go into LinkedIn and on Instagram, and that is just going to be, I'm going to just put up there, heart surgeon without a blade.
Yeah, that's perfect. And it's great that you took the way that your friend sees you, because sometimes I've found this too, is that it's not as important the way we view ourselves. It's so important, and not in a bad way, right? Like being worried about what people think of you, but seeing how do others, am I doing the work that I want to do? Am I supporting the others the way that I want to? Am I living, in the, with my passion and fulfilling how I want to, be in life, and others tell you whether you're doing that more so than yourself.
Yeah, I will tell you, there've been more times in my life than I can count that an external influence and how somebody else saw me actually gave me the push, the nudge, the propulsion to move forward and actually live into the truth of what they were seeing that I was either denying to myself or was blind to. And so I'm a big believer in, as much as we need to listen to our internal voices and block out the external noise of the world most of the time, there are people, particularly those that we know, love, and trust, those that are closest to us, that it's worth listening to sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, Brian. And we'll probably dive into some of what you were just talking about in a little bit, but I want people to get to know you a little bit, because obviously I've read your story, that part of having you on the podcast and seeing you as an iSpark Change social impact hero, which is someone who is spreading positive change, someone that has a positive impact on humanity, through your work and your actions, the different things that you're doing, positive impact. And so every hero has an origin story as to how they've gotten to where they are today, how they're doing the work that they're doing. So if you can, for our audience, share your story, share your origin story of you getting to become a hero.
Yeah, well, I first have to just say thank you. I'm always humbled anytime I get external credit or labeling around being a hero or recognition that the work that we're putting into the world is having an impact. So I just have to say thank you on that. And thank you for the opportunity to be here and for building such a phenomenal platform for me to be able to come in and share my story.
Our pleasure.
I'm going to ask you and everybody that's listening, unless they're driving right now, to just close your eyes for just 1 second. And I'll tell you when to reopen them. I want you to imagine going to a store, having a successful shopping trip, breezing through the checkout line, walking out the door, You feel the sunshine on your skin. You feel the breeze blow through your hair. You've got a pep in your step and you're on going with your day. You get to your car, you start fumbling in your pocket for your keys. And right before you can get to your car to unlock the doors, you turn your head and you see a truck barreling 40 miles an hour right at you with no time to react. Go ahead and open your eyes. That's where this portion of my story begins. My mom, my brother, and I went to our local Walmart to get a 1-inch paintbrush. As we were headed back to the car, anybody who's known me for more than about 2.5 seconds knows that I've always had a big energy for life and excitement. And I talk fast, I walk fast, and I always want to be doing things next. And so the reality of it is I was there. I was ready to get home and put that paintbrush to use. But this was back in the days before there was key fobs. And so my mom had physical keys that she had to get it out of her purse, stick in the door so that she could turn it and we could go on with our day. And as I was standing there, a truck pulls up in front of the store. Driver and middle passenger get out. And the passenger all the way to the right stayed in. But he started to feel the truck moving backwards. So he did what any one of us would do. And he scooted over to put his foot on the brake, but he instead hit the gas. What I didn't really pay attention to until recently, Rick, is that if I was in a vehicle moving backwards with no driver, I don't think I would just like gingerly or softly put my foot on the brake pedal. I would probably scoot over, ramp my knee way up, and slam it down on that pedal to try to stop the vehicle immediately. I didn't really realize that that's probably what happened. So all of that force when he missed went right into the gas pedal and it threw him up on the steering wheel, up on the dashboard. And before you know it, he's catapulting 40 miles an hour across the parking lot right at us with no time to react. Now, I was standing next to my mom's car. We think my hand was on the handlebar, waiting for her to unlock the doors. And it went up and over the median, went over the tree in the median, hit our car, knocked me over, and ran over me diagonally, tearing my spleen, leaving a tire track scar on my stomach, and continuing on to completely sever my left arm from my body. 6:10 p.m., 115-degree day in Phoenix, Arizona. All of a sudden, my mom and brother watch the whole thing happen. They look up and they see my arm laying 10 feet away in the parking lot. Fortunately for me, my guardian angel also saw the whole thing happen. You see, there was a nurse, and I can never tell this story without giving her acknowledgement and credit because she walked out of the store and saw the literal life and limb scenario in front of her, and she rushed immediately into action instead of turning her head to go on with her day, which I'm forever indebted for her choosing to do that. She came over and stopped the bleeding on the main wound and saved my life, and she instructed some innocent bystanders to run inside, grab a cooler, fill it with ice, and get my detached limb on ice within minutes to give me a fighting chance of having my arm reattached. Now, I know you knew that story, but I'm sure that a lot of the people that were listening today had no idea that it was going to go there. And yes, I have a very, very unique story. But what I've also realized in all of my time of doing this, Rick, is that every single one of us has a unique story, regardless of the extremities of that story. And so what's important is that we become aware of the lessons that we can extract from our own stories so that we can become intentional with how do we apply them in our lives. And we all have the ability to do that. And we all have the ability to tap into the collective wisdom of other people's stories to shorten our own curve to learning. So I'm sure we'll get there. I'm sure that we'll unpack it. And I'm going to save the rest of this for whenever the conversation leads us there. But I do have 2 core stories that really have driven a significant portion of my life. And these 2 core stories and lessons are also things that really propelled us on our mission to impact 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. Because I genuinely believe that if we can reduce the level of suffering on this planet, allow people to become more aware and more intentional in who they already are, then we can build a world where people can stand on their own 2 feet, not only confident, but convicted in who they are, knowing that the world won't just accept them, but will embrace them for who they are. This is the kind of world I want to leave for my kids and my grandkids, where we can have more readily accessible joy, freedom, and fulfillment holistically in our lives.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, incredible. And thank you for having us really, for painting the picture. And, as I went off camera, I did close my eyes and was participating in that and just visualizing the scene. It seems to me that memory, I'm sure you've told that story many times, but that memory is as vivid in your mind as it was, right after that day, as it was happening at that exact moment.
What's interesting, my friend, is it's not vivid in my mind. Mm-hmm. It is very vivid in my brother's mind. It's very vivid in my mom's mind. I don't remember it. I know the story. I know the experience, and I know the moments of clarity and consciousness with which I woke up and do have memories connected to. But that day, I have zero recollection. I just know the story because I've heard it so many times. I've obviously been a part of it, and I've told it many times. But that's one of the things that I never lose sight of, is that my mom and my brother have seen things that I will never see. They experienced elements of my story that I don't have perspective on, even though I was the one living it. And so I think that that's always very important for us to recognize is, yes, I have this unique story, but if it wasn't for my mom, my dad, and my brother, I wouldn't be here. And it's not only my story, it's theirs as well.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit, Brian. So do you think that, obviously they play a role in your life, obviously in your development and you becoming the individual that you are now, but how did they play a role, whether it was your brother or your parents, how did they play a role into you becoming, the hero that we talk about, becoming the person that is doing work to impact others' lives in a positive way? How did they play that role?
Yeah. I think they brought a lot of perspective. I think they brought a lot of clarity and a lot of grounding into my entire process. And so, to be perfectly frank, I don't give them all of the credit because I put in a lot of work around recovery. But the reality of it is I would not exist as a human being if it wasn't for the support I had through those trying periods in my life. One of the things that I talk about, and it actually is one of my core lessons and philosophies, and so I'll just jump into it right now because this is a great example, right? At 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old, although I was the one having surgeries done to me, although I was the one that was in and out of school, although I was the one that was having therapy 3-4 days a week at 6 a.m. Yes, I was the one that was having to put in the work. I was also pretty blind to what was going on around me because I was being guided through the process. My mom and my dad were not blind. You see, they were vividly aware of the unceasing medical treatments and years of physical therapy. And the idea of seeing their youngest son grow up without the use of his left arm was a source of great potential suffering for them. So they willed themselves day in and day out to do what was necessary, to do what was tough, to put their own levels of comfort aside so that they could embrace the pains necessary to ultimately strengthen and heal me. So a selfless attitude is something that was deeply ingrained in me because all I saw for years was how often my parents put their own stuff aside to do what was necessary for the one who needed the healing the most, especially from a physical standpoint at that time. So whether it was intentional or not, what they did was they ingrained in me this philosophy and way of living, which was to embrace pain, to avoid suffering. And I believe that when we do this correctly, it's also when we gain the most amount of freedom. But if you look at the nurse, if you look at my parents, you look at my brother, and you look at the personal sacrifices they made for me to even have the ability to be here, happy, healthy, and living a happy, productive, contributing life to society, it wouldn't exist if they hadn't put themselves aside many times throughout the process. And so although I am who I am, and my parents will tell you that I was born often exactly as you see who I am today, I lost myself through that process. I lost myself in so many things, not just with my injury, but the narratives of the world and the shame and the different elements. I'm only in the last few years getting back to that bright, burning, authentic light that I was when I was first born. And so my parents at least gave me the ability to survive so that at some point I could come full circle to who I am at the core, which is who they had before my accident. And that accident was something that truly gave perspective and humility, but it also caused so much pain mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually in my world that took decades to unpack and repair. And so I wouldn't be here if it was not for those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the one thing that you were sharing right there, Brian, is really important for our listeners, because when a lot of people think of a hero, they think of some heroic act or some end thing, or let's say you have a sports hero, right? You see someone and you see they do something momentous and they win a gold medal at the Olympics or whatever, and you just see that, and you don't see the years of toil and struggle and pain that have gotten them to that point. And so you just mentioned how, it was a long time and so very recently. So what do you think what were the biggest catalysts towards getting you to be back to that person? Obviously it was a long journey, right? That hero's journey takes a long time, but what do you think were those real catalysts to you kind of either turning that corner or really becoming the person you used to be, or having that spark in you?
Yeah. So as you indicated, there are many, many little moments and many little catalysts, but I'll hit some kind of the tops of the waves in some of the most basic pieces. The reality of it is when I was a little kid, I refused to be defined by the labels or expectations that other people put on me by viewing my situation through their lens and what they'd be capable of in my scenario. I was so judged often for what people believed I could not do that I created such a narrative on what I could do without anyone else's help. I literally created this intellectual narrative that I'm good, I'm strong, I'm capable, I can do anything myself. And that served me very well for a long time. And we hear all these things about mental toughness, right? Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big believer in mental toughness, but not for mental toughness alone. And probably because it bit me more than anything, full circle, because I was so mentally tough and my intellectual narrative was so damn strong that the world bought into it and it ultimately bit me. 13 years I had this narrative. 20 years old, I re-break my arm in a snowboarding injury. I almost lose it again. And I go 10 months with it hanging by my side because 7 surgeons were afraid to touch it because of the medical malpractice, because of the disaster of what my infrastructure is in my arm today. It's not normal. 10 months was some of the most isolated, lonely, vulnerable, and exposed periods of life I have experienced ever. And the reality of it is I had lots of friends. I had lots of family. I had lots of people that were around, but nobody was there. Now I could look at that and be like, God, all these people let me down. I do all these things for all these other people. But the truth of the matter is they just bought into my mental narrative because Brian's good, Brian's tough, he's capable, he can do anything by himself. And if he needs it, he'll ask for help. But I didn't have the courage or the vulnerability at that time to actually ask for help. So that shifted my whole focus over that next period of time to this idea of vulnerability and authenticity, which I believe are the glue that binds human connection, right? If I have a mental narrative that's really isolated me, then maybe if I focus on human connection, then that's what's going to be the ticket. I'll be able to really get there. I'll be able to advance. I'll be able to deepen my relationships. I'll be able to see things more clearly. I'll be able to understand people better. And by the way, it worked. It was great. I got really, really good from a strategic and tactical perspective at sharing just enough information about myself to demonstrate that I was vulnerable, to get other people to feel safe and protected so that they would then just share everything about their world and be like, I don't know why I'm telling you all this stuff, right? And I don't say that like I was using it for manipulation. It wasn't. It was genuine around wanting to help them. But what I was not paying attention to or being honest with myself is I wasn't actually being vulnerable or authentic to my deepest level. I was sharing just enough to get them to open, because I realized that if I could get them to open, that we could connect at a deeper level and I could control how we connected on that level. It was still a protection methodology. I just didn't understand it. And it wasn't an intellectual narrative that was serving me. It was just my own level of vulnerability that I hadn't completely leaned into. Now, a whole lot of professional things were going on at this time. And in this period of time, when I was focusing on human connection, is also when I realized that I was chasing all the what's of the world. What house, what car, what amount of money, what amount of success. And by the way, I had them all by the time I was 27, every one of them. Everything I ever set out to accomplish in my life centered around the age 30, and I hit it all by the time I was 27. And I don't say that to brag. I'm not sitting here like, oh, look at me, I'm so amazing. No, because what happened is I got all the what's, but I lost who I was. And I woke up all of a sudden, 27 years old, running in circles with people making multiple 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures in some cases, realizing that not only was I miserable, but so many of them were as well. And we really weren't doing the internal work that actually was helping us become better people, better humans. We just were really good at making a fuckload of money, right? And so, and again, I don't vilify money at all. Money is a beautiful tool. I've made a lot of it. I plan to make a lot of it because it allows me to perpetuate impact, okay? But at that time, that was my sole focus, was to create money, to show what I could accomplish. And it was around also in the same vein of I'm trying to deepen my relationships and have better human connection. But what I was still negating at that point is that when I shut off physical pain because the demands of my environment exceeded my ability to cope, I also shut off emotional pain for 25 years. I didn't even know it. Wow. I'm laying on the couch with my daughter she was about 2 years old at this time. And she leans over and puts her arm around my neck. And I don't know, I was 31, 32, something like that at the time. And all of a sudden she gives me a kiss on the cheek and says, Daddy, I love you. And I broke down in tears out of pure joy. Never in my life had I cried out of joy, or at least had I identified with crying out of joy. In hindsight, it happened on my wedding day as well. There's not a single picture where I don't have a cry face because I just lost it that day. And it was pure joy. I just didn't know what it was at the time because I don't cry often. I don't vilify crying. I'm not against crying. But again, human connection without emotion isn't really human connection. So I'd mastered it from a strategical and tactical standpoint. But what I hadn't done is recognize that as much as my intellectual narratives can serve me, my emotional ones can serve me or hurt me too. And so it shifted this whole perspective around, it's not just mental toughness that gets us there. What I'm really, really clear on now is the highest of high performers are those that understand whether they're hardwired intellectually or emotionally and know how to listen to and understand both narratives and be able to balance and regulate between them to know and trust which one is true in the time, because they both lie to us and they both keep us trapped and they both isolate us from the world if we aren't careful. So it's when I started to see like that we don't think and we don't feel, and I'm losing who I am despite the fact that I'm operating at a really high level and I've accomplished all these what's that the world's told me I should want. Well, truly, like what that's led to from now my work is I don't want anybody to ever feel like I used to feel. Mm-hmm. And I want everybody to feel like I feel right now. Joy, freedom, and fulfillment, deep connection with who we are. It is the way. It's the way not only for ourselves, but how we connect with other people. And that's how we create freedom for ourselves and eliminate suffering in this world. It's basic human experience and basic human connection, but we don't talk about thinking or feeling. We don't talk about how we do these things. So I know I just went on a very long answer there, but it's because there's no way to hit the tops of the waves on some of that evolution without giving all the color that supports it. And the reality of it is all of these other moments that I brushed over in those 26 years, those were the themes. Intellectual narrative that bit me, human connection attempt that wasn't totally authentic and vulnerable, and the lack of emotion that now is a complete holistic self that I can allow people to see and move through this world with.
Yeah, and I think Brian, it's you probably didn't figure that you were going to be doing some of your coaching on this call, but you really helped me come to a realization that I was doing the same thing. Just the way that you explained it about the connection, vulnerability, just the strategic and tactics of it without really the emotion and the true connection. That's exactly the way that I lived for years. I lived the exact same way for a long part of my life, because growing up with the youngest of four older sisters, and my father was a disciplinarian, and it was always, you have to be strong and not show emotions and all that stuff. And that's what I thought was how I was supposed to do it. And then, as I was a young father with, like your daughter, you had that tender moment with your daughter. It was really I have 3 daughters now who are all grown, but really having them at a young age is really what helped to change me. And even it even took beyond that. It even took a lot longer, kind of as it did for you. It took more changes and different things throughout my life, and even challenges in my marriage and stuff, and to realize that wasn't really connecting on that deep emotional level. And I was always a very emotional guy, but that I was just keeping that inside. But
that's what the world teaches us, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you having the vulnerability to express that impacted you. I will tell you that that's where I'm at this point in my life. My purpose in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. Because the reality of it is the roots of suffering come in, I believe, 4 areas: the things that are left undone or left unsaid, right? So those are 2 things: left undone or left unsaid. The things we lack permission to feel or say, or the things we lack the words to articulate. For whatever reason, my ability to communicate my own experience often connects with people that are like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I was doing that in my world. And I'm not saying anything other than my own truth, right? Yeah. And what I also love is even what you just said is also the case. There is no final destination. There's only constant evolution of self. I can sit here and talk about these things and the lessons extracted and how I've applied these in my world. But the truth of it is, Rick, I deal with this every single day still. My wife and I yesterday just had a conversation around more clarity and understanding in our relationship, right? That was a blind spot that we haven't seen over the course of the last couple of months. It was only a year ago I unpacked anger. Didn't even know it was there. It was buried so deep it could barely be excavated, right? So the reality of it is that what I always want to be clear on is anytime I come in and I talk about these things, it is not because I have it all figured out or have it all fixed. It's just my truth.
Yeah, and I'd say that's the important part, because for me in the past couple years doing the same thing, talking about my truth, the changes in my life and how I've completely shifted my life in the past couple years and working on new things and everything, that is what has connected me with people. And that is what has helped them to open up and has helped me to impact people on a deeper level. And, much in the same way that you have. And so that is a beautiful thing. And I think that the more, and one good thing that I've realized in working with different people younger and in studying different generations, like Gen Z, is that they're more open to that. And so they're not like my generation or your generation where it's just, oh no, we got to keep that hidden and you can't be open. They're far more open to, share their feelings and share their truth and be honest and vulnerable. And so hopefully with that being more prevalent in society, just over the span of, the next couple decades, we'll see a shift to where people are able to connect on a deeper level.
I think you're completely right. And I mean, I think just since we're talking about human connection, I'll share this one piece as well. I think you're completely right. And I actually want to come back and ask you a question when I'm done with this around the shift that you made, because I think I want to hear about that and why it led to more deep connection. But this idea of the human experience, right? I think that we are all hardwired to desire a few things. We are all hardwired to desire feeling safe. We are all hardwired to desire feeling protected. And those are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. We are all hardwired and desire to feel seen and understood. And we are all hardwired and desire to feel connected. These last two are the two that we desire the most, but they don't happen unless the first two do. Right? So when I say we're safe and we're protected, very often we are not actually protected, or we believe that we're not protected in environments. So we believe or feel that we are not safe. So when that happens, natural human instinct would be to protect ourselves. So when we protect ourselves, and that could be from anything, that doesn't even mean physical threat, just to the whole concept of even emotions. We struggle to be vulnerable because we're too exposed. We could be taken advantage of, we could be injured, we could be hurt, whatever, right? So we put this layer of armor up to protect ourselves. Here's the funny thing about that. When we put that layer of armor up, it's an impenetrable force. So we cannot properly demonstrate who we are to anybody on the other side of that armor so that they can see us and understand us and connect with us, because we have that impenetrable force. Simultaneously, they can't see through it with clarity to actually see and understand us, to actually connect with us. And so what happens is when we tend to protect ourselves, we prevent the two things we desire most. And so one of the things that I talk about as leaders, I do a lot of men's work around this as well, but just in general, I don't care. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, anybody can apply this. The reality of it is if we can convince ourselves that we're safe, which goes against everything we've been conditioned to believe, and we can put ourselves in a position where we recognize that we're safe, and we have the ability to actually layer a realm of protection around the people that we're with and the environments that we're in, what that actually is doing is leaning into and leveraging the fact that we then are putting ourselves in a position where everyone is protected, meaning that everyone is safe and no one has to protect themselves. Everyone gets to be seen, understood, and everybody gets to be connected. And so if you think about this from a vulnerability and authenticity perspective, again, the glue that binds human connection, I think that true strength actually hides behind vulnerability, because our only ability to wrap that string of protection around the environments that we're in is if we can put ourselves into that vulnerable and exposed position and hold the line.
Yeah. And that's very, very, I agree with you completely in what you're saying about, that we need to protect and be seen and feel safe. And so much of what I've seen in my, just connecting with people and conversations with people in the past few years, hundreds from all over the world, is that exactly like you said, we're all looking for the same things. And that, if we can allow people to be seen, to feel safe, to feel protected, then that's where the true connection can come. And that's where I take it a step further, Brian, and say that that's where the change can come to 1,000%. Make the world better, to make
1,000%,
to make us have, just be better as a species, be better as humanity. And I think the pandemic has really accelerated that in many ways for a lot of us. And you asked about myself, that's really where things started to change when I really became focused on my family. And so 21 years ago, when we were living in Southern California, I was in a major car accident where we should have all been killed, according to witnesses and what the car looked like afterward. And it was with my wife and two daughters at the time, and we were all completely unharmed after flipping a car on the freeway, and after losing control in the rain and spinning out of control and all this craziness, which I won't get into, but that's where I really decided to focus on my family and my faith, and that they were what's more important than the material things and everything. And it took a while of those lessons to be beaten into my head, really, because I still would, drift into old habits and everything, and stay closed down and not communicate. And even some time after that, with not communicating with my wife, and we'll celebrate 26 years in June. But we had to go through those, some of those difficult times of not communicating and building walls and everything that, we were talking about. And it really, I've been on this journey of growth over the past few years, and it really came to a head in 2020 when all of a sudden the control that I thought I had was taken away when we go into quarantine and my business goes to virtually nothing, and I don't have revenue coming in, and I had to resign as the COO, acting COO of one of my clients, and to help the business, and I realized become anxious and fearful, and realize, okay, you don't have control, and you need to kind of figure stuff out. And that's where I realized that I was in a far better place. Who was I to complain? That I was in a far better place, that I had a beautiful family, that I had my wife, and that I had a home, and all these things to be grateful for. And once I kind of shifted my mindset towards being grateful, that's when I wrote a book that had been in my head for 20 years since that accident. And I created my organization, I Spark Change, to empower others to elevate their social impact and spread positive change, and started working on that. And that's where the podcast was born, and everything that we are part of today. And it wasn't really until those past couple of years where I decided to tear all my walls down and be completely open, completely vulnerable, share everything. I mean, I've done over 60 podcast interviews myself, and many times they'll say, "Is there anything off limits?" And I'm like, "Nope, you can ask me anything," and I answer any question, and I share straight from the heart. And I can tell you're the same way, and that's where it's like you had said, Brian, that's where I've really connected with people on a different level, and there's no boundaries, and we're really feeling each other on, making that emotional connection. And it's a beautiful place to be, and it's freeing. Like you said, it's a completely freeing place to be. And that's the space that I've been living in. And that I continue to work on. Like you said, it's not like you're just a done, you're done, I'm finished. No, I continue to marinate, and I feel God like chisels away at me every day. He's like chiseling another little part. And that's where I'll continue to work and evolve, for the rest of my life. And I think I'm, on a good trajectory, as I can feel you are, when you kind of make those revelations about yourself, it puts you on a good trajectory. So thank you for asking, because, I think we have that in common, probably why I was drawn to your story.
Yeah. I mean, your story is real, right? And it's one that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Not everybody gets their arm ripped off, but many people have been in a vehicle that's rolled, or close near-death experiences. And so that's the thing, is like, for you to be able to identify some of the lessons that you extracted. And what I love about some of the stuff that you said there, Rick, is it's truly just how our world operates. Regardless of however old you are, when you decide that change is going to happen, you don't just like flip a switch and wake up one day and it's like, yep, my anger's gone. My shame is gone. My shallow relationships are gone. My seek and desire to chase certain things that don't really matter to me is gone. Like, it just doesn't happen that fast. Now, we have the ability to make a decision, choose a choice, and change our path any day. But the patterns don't go away right away. Mm-hmm. Right? So many times the things that keep people stuck are not the strategy and tactics, like, oh, I'm just going to change what I'm doing. Because the reality is we have such deeply ingrained emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that keep us in that same spot. So how old were you when the accident happened?
20. Wait, how old was I? 29? 29.
29. So your accident happens 29 years old, you have 29 years of patterns that are deeply ingrained into who you are. So when you say, oh yeah, 21 years ago, I start turning into my family, right? The reality of it is it's been a process for 20 to 21 years, I'm sure, with different layers that you've gone through. And so if we look at like who we are, like, let's just assume this is a bullseye right here, my fist, okay? And assume that my fist right here is a bullseye. What we're constantly doing and calibrating between is that we have things that happen to us that create pain. So we have these layers of pain that start to develop inside us because so many of us shut it down. And then what happens is the deeper and the more pain that we have, whether it be mental, emotional, spiritual, or physical, we start simultaneously creating layers of armor and protection on the top external side of us. So we're in more pain internally, and we start to literally separate ourselves and protect ourselves even more than we ever have because we're more exposed than we've ever been. The only way to get back to that raw, bright, burning, authentic light of who we are, this bullseye right in the center of who we are, is to simultaneously heal our layers of pain and shed our layers of armor. It's the only way. And it's really difficult work, and it's hard. And it takes 20 years sometimes to all of a sudden even have another point in your life where you're like, geez, I'm so blessed I can now be actually focusing on building quality relationships and be completely vulnerable. But what I want to really demonstrate for people and to give you credit on, Rick, is you did the internal work. You didn't blame it on the outside. Based on how you tell that story, your progression, your ahas, even 2 years ago when COVID hit, you didn't blame, oh, this is happening to me. You looked at it and said, oh, I don't have control. Well, how do I get more control? Well, I can go inward. I can start to better understand the things that have shaped my life. I can start to share more of my stories that might help me better connect with other people. I can actually start to share these stories in a way that also creates healing, because these might be things I haven't talked about, that I haven't exposed. And again, in those 4 roots of suffering, right? They've not been articulated in a way before. So you're still holding on to them, and they're creating resistance and energy drain in your world. And what you've done is you put yourself into a place by doing the internal work to be externally more accepted, seen, understood, and way more deeply connected. But guess what? That connection started with yourself first. Yeah. And so the thing I just have to call attention to and to give you credit on is you've done it right. Right? And yes, have you probably created elements of damage that you've had to repair over the years? Have there been not perfect things in the way you've done your process? Probably. That's the case with all of us.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
That's the case with all of us. But what you've done and what you articulated is every time you've had these moments, what they've done for you is instead of feeling defeated, feeling like you're a victim, feeling like you have no influence or control, what you did was acknowledge, I have no control. The only thing you did was center yourself back in you.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Brian. I mean, that does mean a lot, and it does really amplify the point that, you know, that many of us are going to go through, because I know originally my original feelings when all that was happening, pandemic and quarantine, were to say, okay, and to just get anxious and start thinking about everything else and then not thinking internally. And being someone that has over many years has worked on my mindset and has worked on my personal development and everything, thankfully for me, it wasn't a place that I stayed very long, that I was just lasted there maybe a couple weeks and then I came out of it. But I know for a lot of people, and even, you know, people I work with, and I'm sure yourself, is that they end up staying there for a long, long period of time, decades, or, you know, and there was plenty of things that I had to get past after decades, like we talked about. And it's just, you know, working on that one aspect. So I think just realizing that, you know, that we always do have control over how we're going to respond to things and how we're going to, you know, think about a situation. You know, like for you with your arm, you could say, oh, well, because of this, I'm going to have limitations, as opposed to because of this, I'm going to be stronger. Right. To have the two, you know, opposite viewpoints. And so we always have that choice. And so that's at least one powerful place that if we can get there mentally, then we have that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you expanding on that. And again, for you sharing your story on your own show, because of the question that was asked, because I just think sometimes it's, you know, people are here to listen to you. They might get some nuggets from me, but your following is loyal because of the way you facilitate conversations and what you share. And so, you know, just to reinforce this point, you just showed this is something we all deal with. And you even said it best, right? The thing is we have all been stuck and we will all be stuck again. It's just not okay to stay there.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. And that's what we're hoping we can get people by, hearing stories like yours. We can help get them unstuck.
Yeah.
So tell me, Brian, when, with your journey, we talked about your journey, obviously, a hero's journey is going to have ups and downs and everything like that. So there's times on a journey where there are what we call a spark moment, where it's a moment where the initial action is going to have a ripple effect that goes far beyond that initial act. And it can be something that, someone had a spark moment in your life, like, for example, like that nurse in the parking lot, right? That I'd call as a spark moment because she had an impact that continued far beyond, her initial act of, hey, get the cooler, get some ice, all that. So, and sometimes it's something that you do that may impact others. So talk about an example of a spark moment from your life. Share a story of that.
Yeah, well, I think given the theme of what we're even here to talk about today and kind of the social impact and everything that we've talked about, and you've asked, what got me here and all those things, I think it's really important to hit on one major spark moment that had it not happened, I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you today. 2019, July of 2019, my wife and I went away for a weekend. And it was one of those weekends, brother, that at the time, I don't know, we were married for 12 or 13 years at the time. And the reality of it not married, been together for 12 or 13 years, probably married for 8 or 9. And it was one of those weekends that mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, we were just one. We were united. And what I didn't talk about in my story is that I had some business partners and we built and scaled a successful risk management employee benefits consulting business to over 15 million within the span of a decade. And it was in summer of 2019 that my wife and I, after this weekend, started driving to pick up our kids. And she looks over at me in the car, and this one question was the spark. She said, "What would it feel like if you didn't have to go to the office on Monday morning?" At the time, I had been coaching side by side with my other business for maybe 3 or 4 years. I was already doing that, was already feeling more fulfilled. I also had some health stuff that impacted me a couple of years before that. And what my wife went on to explain, because I was completely swirling in my shame and stuck in my fear in that moment, just absolutely overwhelmed by emotion. And I looked over at my wife and I said, "Babe, that's a loaded question. Can you expand?" She said, "Well, I think you've allowed fear to enter into your world in a way that I've never seen you operate. And I think it's actually caught you into a position where you are stuck and you've convinced yourself that we need the money, we need the status, we need the prestige of this business that's been built and scaled. And what it is, we need the security around it." She said, "But I'm here to tell you that we don't. I don't care if we live in a cardboard box on the corner. What we need is 100% of you and we don't have it." She said, "I think you're lying to yourself because I don't think you recognize that every single day you live in insurance, you're dying a little bit inside and you refuse to see it." She also said, "I also know that the more you spend time in coaching and speaking, the more that you're doing stuff in your entrepreneurial journey outside of this other business, the more I see you light up." And she said, "The more I also realize that you're not even scratching the surface of your potential, nor are you having near the impact on the world that you want." See, at that time, all of my impact externally from my businesses and clients and life was done through philanthropic work, which I still do a lot of. But it wasn't allowing me to give all of what I wanted to give. And so my wife literally threw a dart and she hit the bullseye. And what she said was, "We took a major bet on you once. What if we double down on that bet and let's go see what impact we can have on the world?" I spent 3 months unpacking my shame, my limitations, the things that were actually causing me to not take those actions, because she was right, man. And all she wanted to do was to have me see myself the way she saw me. And in that time of my life, I wasn't able to. But I spent 3 months really going through it, being very intentional. I went through a 7-year cash flow projection. I had to understand what were the limiting factors. What's the financial elements that would keep me from doing this? How do I shift from income to impact, truly? And can I start over? Can I literally just walk away from something and do something new and just somehow miraculously find a way to succeed for my family? I mean, there's a ton of fear, right? A lot of hesitation. 3 months later, I put the wheels in motion. It was September 2019. I communicated with my CEO, my business partners, that I'd be executing my buy-sell at the end of that fiscal year, which ended May of 2020. March hits, COVID hits. Everybody's like, "Are you still going to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all in." There's no hesitation. None. And it was that spark. I'd convinced myself that there wasn't another way to create impact other than the vehicle that I was already driving and was in that was providing for my family. And again, it was an external voice, an external force that gave me that nudge and that spark to realize that I was living way below my ability, living way below my potential. And it was my shame that was keeping me stuck because I didn't want to live too big to make other people feel badly. And so I had to really go through and do my own inside out method, going through my own emotional triggers and behavioral patterns and starting to understand where this is affecting me and owning it and unrooting it and moving through it. But that's why I'm here today, because June 1st of 2020, not even 2 full years ago, I executed my buy, sell and left that business. And I've been 100% dedicated now on impact since that time.
And I'm sure you've impacted many more lives because of that. I'm sure the ripple effect has gone on, and you've impacted many more lives because of your wife's, initial just asking you that question, I guess. And it kind of takes us full circle to where we started at the beginning. Is sometimes it's our, how others view us and not the way that we view ourselves that makes the biggest difference. So thank you very much for sharing that, Brian. So as one final question here on the podcast is our goal at iSpark Change is to impact 1 billion people, similar to you guys, impact 1 billion people in the next 5 years through our community and through our work. We're working on a social media platform to connect and impact 1 billion people. Now, we know we can't do this alone. We know we need to have leaders and heroes like yourself that are helping to show others the way, because we all need, guides on that journey. And a big part of that is that many people feel, as I used to, and maybe as you did, that you're one person, you have your own life. Who are you to impact the world? Who are you to make this change? You're just kind of going along and having, your happiness in your life, and that it's not really your goal or your responsibility to change the world. At least that's kind of how I was feeling, even though I felt that nudge for many years and didn't do anything about it. So we value your thoughts and your opinions as a social impact hero. Obviously you've shared many of them today, and we're very grateful for that. So we want you to look into the future. So we have our little iSpark Change crystal ball, right? And we want you to look into the future and paint a picture of what the world can become if everyone takes that spark and says, hey, I can impact the future. I can be open, and I can be vulnerable with others, and I can share with others, and all the things that we talked about today. What if everyone decides that and feels that they're empowered to, be safe and be seen and protected? What would the world be like?
I think it'd be a lot more beautiful place. I think we, for a whole variety of reasons, feel the need to protect ourselves so much these days that it's the thing that's truly preventing us from connecting at the deepest levels. And you can see this play out in every area of life. I mean, we are so polarized and politicized in every single thing that happens. Everything. And people associate on one side of a line because when they align with people that think like them, right, that operate just like them, that they'll be safe and protected. But the reality of it is we're also minimizing and negating all of the ways that we actually are the same. We are in common. We actually all want the same things. And so what I would really like to see is that we would have a world that recognizes that the gift is in the gray area. The gift is actually meeting each other in between. It's communicating, it's respecting varieties of different opinions. It's seeing that who you are, Rick, is completely different than who I am. And that's a beautiful thing, because I can love and appreciate you for what you bring to the world versus being threatened by either what you bring to the world, highlighting what I can't do, or by not being so clear on who I am that I can bring my own light to the world. The reality of it is what I said in the beginning is if we can allow people to become more aware and more intentional and really align with who they are, drop the armor and be vulnerable, we can create a world that truly allows us to not just be who we are, but we get celebrated for who we are. We are so afraid to show the world who we are that we hide behind those lines of protection in the polarization and politicization. And it makes sense, because here's what happens. If we're just a pendulum, let's just assume we're a pendulum, right? We're fighting for one side or the other, black or white. If we fight because we have to protect our stance to make sure that we are right, then all we're doing is swinging the pendulum to the other side. It's forced to live in the other side. But if we recognize that it's really in surrender, it's allowing the pendulum to swing right in the middle where we all can win. We all can connect. We all can communicate. We may not always get what we want in every single capacity, but I'm not convinced that what we want is always actually what serves who we are the best. And so I think we'd have more of a utopia, more of an ability for us to actually solve world problems together. And just like you said to me, you weren't expecting to coach today on this call, but if we all can do this, the thing is we are not that different from each other. Your story, my wife's story, my kids' stories, all of my associates' stories, anybody that I coach's stories, anybody in the world's stories will resonate and connect with other people. You give them permission to live their truth and their stories, the more you're willing to break the mold of what the world has told you to hide behind in terms of our armor and our polarization and politicization. Collective impact's the only way, brother. But moved people move people. And so that's all we ask in the world is we create a lot of content, excuse me, to elevate and empower people is to literally, if you get moved, move that content through the world. Because moved people move people, and it's the only way we get to 1 billion, either individually or collectively.
Yeah, very well said. Well, thank you for sharing that, Brian, and painting that picture, because I think it's important for people to see it through others' eyes, exactly for the reasons that you were talking about, is so they can see that we really aren't that different. We really don't want different things. And as if people can see it through others' eyes and realize, oh yeah, I want the same things, then they can celebrate those differences as we were talking about. So thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate that. So how can our audience, I know our audience want to learn more and know more about you. How can they connect with you? How can they follow you?
If you're on social, go to @BogertBrian, brianbogert.com or iamnolimits.com are the ways to engage with our world, to extend impact and the ripple effect of moving people. I'd also like to give a free resource to anybody who's listening. If you go to nolimitsprelude.com, it's a coaching course. It is over 30 minutes of video content to begin with the end in mind and start calibrating with who you are. It is completely free. Now I'm going to fully disclose, yes, there's an email exchange to get access to it. Yes, you'll get some prompts throughout it to guide you through the journey. And when you're complete with it, yes, you're going to get 4 emails with other opportunities to engage if something resonated. But I want to be very, very clear here. This is not an attempt to just get you onto an email list. If you never purchase anything from us, I'm okay, because 99.9999999% of the billion lives we impact will never pay us $1. It's the moved people that are going to move other people. And that's all I'm asking is if you take advantage of this, make sure that you share it and apply it into the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Brian. And we will put that in the show notes so everybody will have access to that and they can find you easily. And thank you for taking time to share your heart and I'd say your wisdom with the world. You practice a little of that heart surgery without a blade, I think, today with your words. So thank you for sharing with our audience, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Rick, thank you, brother.
All right, Impact Heroes. Well, remember, it's our stories that connect us all, and we loved hearing Brian's today. Brian Bogert, you truly are an iSpark Change social impact hero. Remember, Impact Heroes, every positive action can be a spark moment that has a ripple effect that spreads far beyond the initial act. So go out there and spark change. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, then please smash that 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify and leave a review. We value your comments and we want to hear from you in the community. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and we'll see you next week on the iSpark Change podcast.